Okay, so Gwenno, welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be back at the source.
Back where it all happened.
Yep.
I was trying to. It was November 2022 that you were here, wasn't it? Writing music.
Yeah. You got in touch through Baxter, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then I was wanting to write another album. I just put out my Tresor album, which was another one I'd written in St Ives. And then I just always think things are meant to happen for a reason. So you got in touch, and it was just like the most generous offer of just come to St Ives and you can stay in my flat and you can just make stuff. And I was like, really? What do I have to do? And you're like, I just need one photo of you and that's it. So it was just the most generous, beautiful thing, which I think really fed into how I was feeling. Sort of created this sort of sense of security in creating, which is so important, which I know that's what you're about and that's what you're trying to make. And then I came down, I was very pregnant. And what was great was coming back to the source, because I'd written a record and I thought, oh, there we go. Yeah. I've written my record in Cornwall, in Cornish, trying to sort of absorb it all and trying to work out why it is that it's happened beyond just having the language and the history through my parents.
Yeah.
And coming back again was a really good thing because I couldn't go back to that feeling again. And it made me question more things and it made me have to move forward. There's something, because I think you can just keep moving and keep running.
Yeah.
So, say if I'd gone somewhere else to write another record, then I could have not faced quite a lot of things because I could have just gone and found another thing to be interested in.
Yeah.
But coming back to the same place meant that I had to face a little bit of reality as well, I think, about maybe perhaps what I was projecting onto Cornwall and like that, all of that energy I was putting into because I was so inspired by the language and everything that was going on. And having to be a little bit more, not a realist, but having to look at the same place from a different angle and going, okay, well, actually, it's not what is that was sort of taking those rose-tinted glasses off a little bit. And I think that helps you grow to go back and sort of work through that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I remember when you replied to me, I remember it so clearly, getting the message and you saying, I'd love to come. I am 7 months pregnant. I remember getting it and being like, wow. I was so in awe because I was like, you could have been thinking like, oh, I'm just going to cocoon and play it safe. And you were like venturing to a flat you didn't know. And I remember saying, oh, it does have a bed and it does have like a bathroom. And you were like, yeah, cool. You weren't even like, does it have this? Does it have that? And I remember just thinking, wow, like this is a different kind of way of living. I found it really inspiring at the time.
I think that's what it's about. I think when everything happens for a reason, I think. And I think it's so important to say yes. Yeah. It's important to say no. But I think if there's something that feels exciting, it feels right, you can always make it work. Yeah. I tend to want to pile it all in rather than go, oh, well, I'm going to not do anything. Yeah. I think it's because it's always about the sense of adventure, and it's always about that imaginary book that you're going to write when you're like 80, hopefully. You know what I mean? And not for anybody, just for yourself. And going like on your deathbed, you're going to go, well, I had an adventure, and that was ridiculous, wasn't it? Yeah. So that's all. That's my driver. Yeah. Is like how extreme and ridiculous something can be, but but joyful and kind as well. Not bad. I mean, all the bad stuff comes with it, but it's not my intention. Yeah. It's the adventure, I think.
Definitely, and it's funny to even see you sort of 2 years after that.
Yeah.
Now I'm like 2 years after, and you now have a little girl as well. Who was growing here.
Yeah.
And
she's so part of it, and it was odd, because I'd made a record called Tresor, and we'd made this film. A friend of mine, Claire Murray Bailey, she makes film on Super 8, and we'd made this film together exploring the record. And at the very last minute, I'd decided we should go to Menontoll, which I'd written a song about Menontoll without being there, just because I'd found the imagery of it so inspiring. And we went there, and then she took a photo. It was quite windy, you know what it's like at Menontoll, it's quite windy. And I can't remember, I think it must have been, it would have been like February or something like that. And then we took a photo of me hugging this stone. And then the record came out and everything was great. And then I was pregnant, and my son, he was like, Mum, don't you think it's really strange how you went to Cornwall and you hugged this stone and then Elo arrived?
Yeah.
Like the baby. Because I know obviously there's like, it's a cure for rickets and it's all of that
Yeah.
stuff. But I've always felt, and especially going to Menontal as well, that sorry, I'm speaking Welsh. The element of fertility is really important.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, you know, it's just beautiful. Like my 7-year-old son just thought that Elo had arrived out of Cornwall and out of this process. And there's something to me about how, especially with music, because it's this process of rearranging space. And I think the way that I make music is to try and digest life entirely. It's so autobiographical that it's so strange how it's a trigger for big changes in your life as well. Because I really wasn't thinking about pregnancy. I had a 7-year-old boy, but something about the album and something about Menontal and that whole process was about like this little girl needing to be in the world. Yeah, it's just really strange.
Really
but
strange.
I think it's also to do with the magic of music as well, which I think something I've been thinking a lot about with music is that the incredible thing about music is how it can rearrange a space with sound. And I think, for example, with film, which is also an exploration of time and space, and it creates its own world. But a film is, you know, it's on a screen, it's in a corner, you can put it away. Whereas you can hear music in any space, and it changes the space. It's something a lot more tangible and a lot more real life about it in a way.
Yeah.
And it's sort of giving into that magical element of it.
Yeah. I think the fact that your son picked up on that was so good.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Like 7-year-olds do, you know, I think that's what they do.
Very
they know.
in tune, definitely.
Yeah.
And for people who might be listening to the podcast, obviously Menontal has such a link with fertility and the superstition of if you go through the hole, is it 7 times? I think it's 7 or 11 times, that you'll be, you know, more fertile. So
well, I only hugged it. I didn't even get through it because it was so wet and rainy.
Would have had triplets.
Oh God, yeah, I'm lucky I didn't go through it. Yeah, I would have more children.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go near the place ever again. No, I will.
In a few years.
In a few years, yeah.
But what really comes to mind, I remember when we went for coffee when you were really pregnant, you were talking about your experience being pregnant with your son and how much kind of a surprise it was, like the experience of being pregnant but also childbirth, and how much, I remember you just saying to me, like during and after, you were just like, why are women not ruling this shit? Like,
it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And I think I think I felt a lot more, I think now with 2 children, I think I feel slightly differently. I think I was quite angry about how shocking having a child was, just because of the way that it's portrayed often, not as, and this is not true, because actually I think so many women have really expressed and explored what childbirth is. For example, like one of my favourite pieces of art is by Monica Zhu, God's Giving Birth, and I just think exactly, because I think the power of what you're doing there is the thing that should be celebrated, and perhaps, you know, in contemporary society that sort of all gets a bit lost. Clearly it does, because women die in childbirth all the time and are not looked after, so it's, you know, it's just a really awful situation. But even from a point of privilege, which I have, I still was quite shocked. But so I think it takes a while, and I think the big thing for me with having children is that it takes so long to get back to yourself. So it's not just the trauma of childbirth, it's about losing who you are in tiredness, and again, I think so many women are really exploring that through art and have done for a very long time. I think there's a film that Amy Adams is in recently that she turned into a wolf, and I thought, well, that sounds about right. You know, being at home and you know how absolutely insane you go. Yeah. And how feral you get. It's just like, but yeah, and actually, like with Tresor, that was so much about me. The record wasn't, oh, isn't this blissful and lovely? It was about like trying to find myself again. So actually, that's the other thing as well with creating, it's not necessarily it's the process thing, but it's for me it's always about a way out as well of the struggles of your own life. I find that performing music and creating music is about a way out of the day-to-day and the mundanity of that, and I cling on to it, and I always have, and I've always really valued any opportunity, and I think that's why I want to be on stage forever.
Yeah,
Because it's such a privilege, and it's such it's just so vital to your life. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without it, really. God, I really don't. I don't know what people around me would do without me doing it either.
And after having kind of done that the first time with Nico, with your son, and then regaining that identity after by writing.
And then I gave it away again.
Yeah.
So quickly. I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine now. Oh God.
So then untold for you.
I know. You know, it's like it took me 7 years, and I was like, I'm fine now, 7 years later.
Yeah.
And then, having a second child, even with a gap, doesn't change what 2 children is, because obviously it's 2 people that are far more important than you are. And again, it's just trying to find this, as both parents, as parents or carers or whoever's in their life, it's just trying to find those spaces that you can still exist, which I mean, it's just really important.
Definitely. And sort of taking it back, I remember when, we spoke about, so your dad was a Cornish poet.
Yes, is a Cornish poet.
Cornish
still
poet.
is.
Still writes now?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Wow.
He's got a book coming out in the next few months,
Oh my gosh.
published by Francis Bootle, who's a fantastic publisher that publishes a lot of minoritized language stuff, quite specialist subjects. Great, in London, Clive Bootle. He's really great.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah,
Still
really
working,
good.
because he's 70, in his early 70s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he never stops. That's the thing that's been the great example in a way, because, living in Wales, and we grew up in a, hovel of a flat in quite poor area of Cardiff. I had like 2 sort of academic parents that perhaps weren't as practical, and they were quite lost in their thoughts and wanting to break out of the practicalities of day-to-day life, perhaps.
Yeah.
Is that I've got this example of both people really, and particularly with my dad as a creative, maker, just getting up at 5 and writing before we got to go to school, and then going to work and coming back, and just again just creating the space to be exploring ideas and art, and that we have no control over the card we get dealt, and I think that if you've got a desire and a drive to create, then you've got to do it. And Cornish poetry is very niche.
Yeah, it is.
But it's really my dad's a really brilliant poet.
Yeah.
He's a really, really beautiful, very romantic, and I don't mean in a sense of like romantic love way, but just as he's a romanticist, and I think it's just a brilliant body of work, and there's more to it, to add to it as well.
Yeah. I had a little read of some of his poems this week.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. His book covers, just that it really kind of got me thinking of how, for him, he must be so proud to have seen you take, him to already be working in quite a niche language, as you say, that Cornish, that maybe, I don't know, I know it was 500.
Oh yes, 500 fluent speakers, there's a couple of thousand. But I think for me, I love undiscovered things, and I think I carried, because I was raised in Cardiff speaking Cornish and Welsh, so that helped a great deal, because there's such similar languages, and there's a lot more of a public life in Wales with the Welsh language, obviously, because there's a lot, it's like 500,000 speakers, so it's just a very different, quite a strong position in comparison, and I carried it around with me, and I'd always tell people in my travels, oh yeah, I speak Cornish, and be like, what's that? Yeah. And that sort of bugged me, because I feel like I've sort of compelled to lay it all out on the table. Like I can't leave if people are like, oh, what's that? Oh, I kind of want to over-explain myself, and I think I do that a lot.
Yeah.
with what I make. And I just felt that there was such an energy around the culture and around the language. And I knew that so many people had put so many years and hard work into it, that I sort of just knew I had a hidden gem in it. And it gave me a lot of strength creatively to sort of own things as well. And I think you have to, I think it's so important to own everything that you have and be proud of it, whether it's good or bad. And resolve it, because we're so multifaceted, and I think we've got to just be really accepting of everything. And I think that I did find that hard because I wanted to make music, but I liked that conflict. And I think especially because we'd made a Welsh record initially, I felt really empowered by that, because I thought I've done the thing that's not trying to please at all. I'm doing the thing that I think is important to me, and there's no value beyond that really that you have any say in. And I sort of knew then with the Cornish language, and I'd always wanted to make a Cornish record. So, and I just knew how rich it was. I just knew how rich it was, and I think that culturally, particularly in the musical landscape, I think anything that sort of add to the mix just enriches the whole culture. My Cornish language context is it's an urban one and it's an internationalist one. So it's in real contrast with the Cornish language experience in Cornwall, which is far more isolated, it's rural, it's less intertwined with other cultures, just out of geographical reasons more than anything else. So, but I think I've always felt empowered. So it's like, oh yeah, I have another language of a place that's far away as well. So that would be the feeling that I had, and I just felt part of this sort of multicultural city then.
Definitely. And so when your 2018 album came out, Look Of, it was entirely in Cornish, and it was credited with spurring a 15% increase in people taking up Cornish lessons. How was that for you? Like, what did that feel like?
Amazing, but I think I was just tapping into stuff that was going on, like that was it was quite exciting at that time, because I was doing that, and it was the time that I met like Ed Rowe and Mark Jenkins and Denzel and all of, and Will, Coleman and stuff. So there was just like loads of people doing stuff that was from a generation perhaps, because my dad's always been in touch with everyone in Cornwall, particularly through the Cornish language. He's really tied in with it. But they're an older generation, and perhaps what was exciting me was that there was a slightly younger generation that were doing different stuff. That was sort of an echo of what the older generation had done, but it was sort of a bit broader, and it was actually also infiltrating Cornish communities that perhaps would have just gone, oh well, the Cornish language is just about like bearded men and people that are into language and linguists, and there was sort of a real vitality to it that got me really excited. So there was a lot going on in Cornwall at that time that I think I was just tapping into.
Love that.
Love
that.
But I think everything is like that. I think as an artist, your antlers are just so sensitive. And that's what it's all about. You're sort of like picking up vibes and energy. And I that's my driver. I'm just like, what's happening over here? Ooh, what's that? Literally following your ears and your nose. And then you sort of end up somewhere quite interesting, and you're like, oh, hi. It's like and it's always about conversations as well. Like, it's never about a singular thing. Like I had that to offer, and because I knew like I could. Le Corv really is like an overview of 1500 years of Cornish history, and I just knew I had that. Like, I had that to tell. Like, it was so easy for me to do. It wasn't an effort, and I was really privileged again to be on a label, Heavenly, that are just like, I say to Jeff, I'm going to do a Cornish language album. It's like, yeah, great, just do it, whatever, because he's just like, yeah, great. So I think it's always about also being around people that encourage you to just it doesn't matter, does it? It's like, if it's interesting, that's all that matters.
It's the element of play, isn't it, and experimentation.
Totally, and not worrying about outcomes either. It's sort of, and also just trying to think about like, what's the most ridiculous thing you could do. And I felt that making a Cornish record was the most ridiculous thing I could do.
Interesting. That's such a good way of looking
You know, what's
at
the thing
things.
that makes it feel like you're just throwing it all up in the air?
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing you've got to do.
Yeah. I love
Rather
that.
than the thing that feels safe and like there's going to be like a constant.
Yeah.
But that's what's great about making records, because you make one record and you're just constantly reacting to your previous work. I'm like, obviously that's a general thing that happens with all
Yeah.
artists. They kind of go, well, I need to not do that now. I need to do something else. And, like,
Yeah.
how do you look at it from a different angle and make it feel a bit more dangerous to you?
Yeah. It's interesting. I can definitely see a pattern emerging of like you coming at 7 months pregnant, throw it up in the air. And when I was looking into sort of your early days, even like
Yeah.
moving to Las Vegas when you were 17,
Yeah.
for example, like tell us a little bit about that experience.
So I was, yeah, like things weren't going great at school. Terrible, actually. My parents had got divorced when I was 11, and I was just a real, like, I had so much energy, and no one could be bothered to help, and no one knew how to help. And so I wasn't doing great, and wasn't probably not going down the right path, really. I was playing quite a risky game. And I'd always been dancing, and my dance teacher had really invested so much in me, Gordon, beautiful man. And it's crazy, because my parents can't drive, and my mum used to just like work 3 jobs a week, like cleaning, translating, anything she could do to fund me dancing. And I'd go every weekend, and I wouldn't even try. I was terrible, and Gordon would be like, come on, and I was good, naturally good dancer.
Yeah.
And then Riverdance happened, and I remember me and Gordon watching it after. I mean, we're just like, this is ridiculous, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I'd actually gone to see the Chieftains play when I was about 9 or 10.
Okay.
At the St Ives School in Cardiff, and Jean Butler had come out to dance, and I was just like, I remember, and we were right up in the gods, because obviously it was cheaper tickets, and I remember just going, oh, please, will they ask on stage if anyone's an Irish dancer here? Because if they ask, I'm just going to put my hands up, and I just want to get on stage, because I just saw her, and I was like, that's what I want to do.
Wow.
I mean, that's it. And this was before Riverdance. Then Riverdance happened. And then I was 16, I'd gone to college for a couple of weeks, and I was like, this is a disaster. It was the whole thing, the whole period was a disaster. Then I got an audition in Dublin to do Lord of the Dance, which at the time, I mean, in hindsight, it's like a super tacky show. It really is. Like, Riverdance has aged so well. I think it's just the classiest show. I love it. I think it's still got legs. I think it'll keep going for another 100 years. Because it's brilliant. Musically, I love Bill Whelan's music. It's just gorgeous. But anyway, I went for this audition in Dublin, and I got in.
Oh my gosh.
And then, there are angels looking after me, because I do not know what would have happened to me had I not got that chance. I can't tell you how dangerous a position I was in. And then got shipped off to Australia with Michael Flatley himself, and then we were there for a couple of weeks, and then I toured Germany a lot, and a lot of Northern Europe, and then there was talk about a show in Las Vegas. So I did a couple of shows with Flatley as lead, and then I got the part to go to Las Vegas, and then so when I was 17 I got shipped to Vegas. So you were there 6 months at a time.
Wow.
2 shows a night, Sunday, Monday off, all accommodation paid for, and a lot of time on your hands and too much money.
Yeah.
And fake IDs, and going to nightclubs. Not interested in gambling, but just lots of clubbing, and it being the late 90s. Very, very wild times. Teenagers. It was like, do you know, did you ever see that? Was it 13? It was that.
Piercings and
It was just like the madness of what teenage girls are like. And then at that, and Vegas was. I was a struggle, because what I was looking for was history, and I think actually because the internet didn't exist, I couldn't find it, and I was really frustrated by it, because I'd come from such a culturally rich place, and I was going to the heart of America, of the disposability of American culture, and I was like, this is just too disposable for me. I really can't cope with it. And I started to really miss, I wouldn't say home, because I didn't really have a home, but sort of, I think I just missed the Celtic spirit more than anything, because I was in this bubble, and I remember I hired a piano, so I had a piano, and I was starting to think about making music, and actually, what was the massive thing was like Super Furry Animals, Catatonia. I remember buying Catatonia CDs when I lived in Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace. There was a Virgin Records there. And two-step, like two-step garage, which I was just like, wow, this is so exciting. Everything felt like quite raw and like DIY and from the people, you know, because I was in North America, and all that was on MTV was Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys. Yeah. And I was like, this is just awful. So there was like loads adding to why American culture was. I was just like, I wasn't going to gigs or anything like that, because there weren't many gigs happening in Vegas at the time. I mean, the only gig I went to see was James Brown, which was great.
Amazing.
It was really, really good. It was so good. He was so ridiculous. It was in like a discount shopping mall outside of Vegas, and we all went on a bus. And I don't know why I don't know who said let's go see James Brown, but then we just did. And it was like it was a great gig. And then I started to miss home, and then I got a transfer to a new show that Flatley was doing, and it was just a disaster. I had an eating disorder that was a complete mess. It was such a mess, and it was so contagious. Eating disorders are so contagious. Like one person starts off, and then you all start not eating, and it was terrible. I mean, it was awful, and I sort of knew, I was like, this is really like not good. Like, I need to sort this out. And also feeling like excited about music and thinking, I want to be there. Yeah. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want to be there. So then eventually I left the show, because I was just like, do you know what? I don't want to be like a dancer in Michael Flatley's show anymore. Yeah. Like, this is rubbish. Like, I've got loads of stuff I want to say, and I'm on stage every night. I'm not saying any of it. Yeah. I'm literally like propping up the situation. Yeah. Anonymously. I could be here or not be here, didn't matter. And I remember my mum going, no, you can't leave, you have to stay, it's such a good job. And it was a good job at the time. It was a ridiculously good job. But I was just like, it's so boring. Yeah. I'm going to die out of how stifling the situation is creatively. I can't cope. So I left. And I remember being on the bus back to Cardiff, and I was looking at trees and going, look at these trees just growing where they want, and they're just so free, and I'm going to be like that. So I had this real sort of, it was, and I say it now, but it doesn't express how I felt when I saw all of nature just doing its thing. Right. Without, I don't know, there was something about it, and I need to think about it so I can explain it better sometime, but it's just like, I'm trying to look at a tree now and trying to imagine what it was, but it really hit me. Yeah. Like, that there's freedom available, but you just got to free your mind from it. And it's like, don't be like held down by the shackles of situations that actually are irrelevant. And also being like, I think I was about 19. And actually, at 19, I felt really old. I was like, my life's over now.
That's so interesting.
I did. I was like, I'm done now. I'm not young anymore. I mean, I felt like
Past
that.
it.
Past it. I did at 19.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like, I'm so past it. So I thought my youth died then. Right. But I think it was because I never got a youth, really. I think, having a job at 16 that's so high, full on, you don't get that youth, really, in the same way. You don't get that sort of freedom to sort of chill out and hang out on the grass and go to shows and, nothing matters. Like, I didn't have that. So that was that. And then I moved to London, and then I just sort of pestered lots of people to try and make music with. Yeah.
Wow, because we've talked about that sort of toxic element of the 90s and the noughties, and I guess you would have been right in that at that time.
I just think it's crazy, like the pressure of it. Like, I just think, but I mean, I tell you what helped actually, because I went to London and then eventually came back to Wales. I started putting records out in Welsh and Cornish. That's where I started. I was sort of mulling around Cardiff, and then this band, the Pipettes, came and played to Cardiff, and one of the girls wanted to leave because she wanted to do other stuff, Julia, and she went on to a great band quite soon after. So they were looking for someone, and they sang and they danced, and it was all a bit silly, and I just thought, that's exactly, I'm from Brighton. Yeah. I thought, this sounds fun. because Cardiff was quite miserable at the time, very post-rock. Oh my God, there's so many men making post-rock music that was so unsexy and horrible, really, and just it was just miserable because it was the hangover of the 90s. So all those great 90s bands had they were touring around, and there was just this void, where there's nothing. It was just really wet, and so the Pets didn't. I was just like, that's my ticket.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was with Riverdance at the time, so I'd gone back to the dancing, which was nice to resolve it, and I got offered lead in Riverdance.
Wow.
And actually, it was the same time as the Pipettes, and I turned the lead role down in Riverdance, and then I went and joined the Pipettes on a tour around Ireland with the Go Team, and then it was quite chaotic from then on in. I was coming from what was really stark was coming from a very well structured situation with Riverdance.
Yeah.
Very professional. And joining an indie pop band that had never been professional. They were, people were quite young, just come out of uni or just come out of school. Really, not understanding, you've got to turn up for rehearsals.
Yeah.
You've got to, not be completely ruined when you do a gig. And it wasn't that. And it was quite a learning curve. And that was quite hard because culturally in general, we were in very different places. But it was a real education. And I'm sort of processing it now.
Yeah. What do you think you learnt most in that time, would you say?
I think what I loved about the whole band and everyone in it was that I found them so interesting. They were very, very confident about their taste in music. And also they were very focused because Brighton is such a frivolous place. And comparison, it's like the polar opposite to Cardiff or Wales, okay? In Wales, everything is earnest and everything is very serious.
Right.
And it's economic, it's geographical, it's all of those things. And in Brighton, everyone was like, the more ridiculous that you are, the better. And actually, the more frivolous something is, the more value there is to it. Because that's Brighton, that's the place. And I loved that because I was so fed up of being serious, which I tend to be. I was like, oh, this is great. This is so silly. But there was a sort of spikiness to the silliness as well. And I think, I'm not sure. So beyond music taste, I discovered a lot of music through everyone in the Pipettes that I'm really grateful for. That has really shaped my life.
Yeah. And
we had really funny experiences. Really silly, funny experiences that I cherish.
Yeah.
And I think more so now I look back at it and think, oh, we really did that. And actually I'm really proud of it. Because I think for such a long time I was didn't feel that I could claim ownership over it. And I felt that I wasn't sure if the frivolity was valid because I'd gone back to Wales and all of that stuff. And actually I do think the frivolity was valid. And it was really serious frivolity, there was a real purpose to it. It was like, come on, let's be ridiculous, wear polka dot dresses, be a bit bratty and just be ridiculous and sing songs that, about not committing to someone, not caring. And it was a reflection of the age. But I do think once the crash came in 2008, that's when that was the line. Then it's like, God, this doesn't make sense anymore. This is not an expression that has a value in what the time is now. Because that was a big cut-off point, I thought, 2008.
Because it's interesting to hear you say, at 19 you were like, right, that's it. Youth is over.
Yeah.
And then having the Pipettes after that,
yes.
which was very I don't know. It
At
sounds
23,
very.
I was in a band that was the really seemingly most childish thing you could ever do. Yeah.
Sounds great. But I wonder if that was a...
Oh, totally. I was thinking, I'm really serious and this is my life's over. And then there was obviously any spark of fun, which I'm always up for. That's my sort of downfall, really. I'm like,
yeah, I think it's
should
great.
We just do something really stupid? Yeah.
I think it's great.
Terrible. I need to work that out.
Or not.
Yeah, it's a lifetime.
So you'd visited Cornwall as a child a little bit, but you came here for the first time, to write in 2020 to St Ives, and then again in 2022. You were writing a new record in 22, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it was in this very room that I wrote the records. Well, I started it, and you kindly invited me to stay. You got a really heavy stage piano for me to play.
Borrowed that off
Oh,
of someone.
it was great, but it helped, and I was listening to loads of like the more recent Leonard Cohen records, Joni Mitchell records, because it just felt, I think there's something about this room and about your style as well that's very classic. It's very, certainly from an interiors point of view, very mid-century, but like in the best, most artists in St Ives way. So I was like totally feeling the vibes of it. And I actually started, the first song that I wrote, which I told you about, which I've named after your school, was just, oh gosh, I'm here, and God, what is all of this? And thinking about my pregnancy. And then started thinking about all the other places that I'd been and lived in. And I thought, oh, there's an idea in that. Just thinking, having the time to reflect as well, being my age, vintage. Being able to look back, and actually from a really, again, a privilege of security, you know. I think that the past 10 years for me has been a rehabilitation from the noughties, actually.
Wow.
Because it was so traumatic that I think I needed to retreat back to Wales and dig deep and re-nourish myself through my childhood, actually, because the first 3 records really are about childhood and trying to grow out of that, and this album is finally about processing the 10 years up until I turned 30 of the chaos of everyone. You know, I lived in different cities, people that I'd met, and also wanted to like pay a tribute to those moments of people that you meet, because you meet so much. Like, I feel like I've had so many lives and I've never been able to truly acknowledge them and say sort of thank you, you were there. And then I've got a lot of old friends and sort of fellow travellers that are on the record as well, that are a real reflection of then and now, people that I'm still in touch with as well. So yeah, I think that so much of it has been about that rehabilitation and being able, and I think you do need a bit of distance to see it for what it was, and also that you weren't always at fault. I think that the noughties was such a, it's interesting to me that the noughties is being glorified at the moment, because actually the noughties was a very hard and quite dark period generally for most people, and particularly within music as well, unless you had a trust fund, which so many did, and actually a lot of the artists and bands that have survived had trust funds, actually. I think that there was just, you know, my memories of the noughties in London is, you know, is cleaning pub toilets. It's, you know, doing a gig and people falling out, and you know, there's some good stuff, but it was hard. It wasn't an easy ride at all, even though actually a lot of the music that came out of it was quite frivolous. Yeah. But actually, it wasn't a frivolous time, apart from being frivolous with your own health, mental and physical. You were quite frivolous and flippant with that, but actually, you know, that's, you know, it wasn't. It was a really tough, like, hand-to-mouth existence. And I think the record's so much about a tribute to surviving it, a tribute to youth. It's like it's sort of an overview of 25 years, really.
Wow.
It sort of starts off in Las Vegas because it's about the gamble, isn't it?
Oh, so it starts off in Las Vegas.
Yeah, well, it's about the gamble, and I think I just feel like it's so symbolic. It's so symbolic that I got given. You know, what I love is that my parents tried to raise me, particularly my mum, to reject Anglo-American culture. She's like, it's all bad. She's from London. It's all bad. You know, it's capitalism. It's terrible. She was like, you know, it's all about socialism. It's all about looking east and not looking west. And I love the irony of her and my dad. And my dad not so much, because he's a bit more of a culture vulture and he's like far more open. But my mum was very like, no, this has to be, you know, I wasn't allowed to watch English television.
Wow.
I always say it, but I just think it's such a good image that, because S4C was a channel that people fought for, went to prison for, which was on Channel 4 in Wales when there were only 4 channels. And at 5 o'clock, the Welsh language kids TV would come to an end and the Munsters would start. And I didn't know what the Munsters sounded like until way into my 30s because, and I'm just looking at it, because my mum would just turn the volume off. And out of sheer, determination, my sister and I would just sit there and watch the Munsters on silence. Because I just wasn't allowed to hear English. Like, you can do that now, but you couldn't do that at the time. But coming back to it, I love the irony of all of that like trying to sort of control, like, keep capitalism out, keep Anglo-American culture out. And the first job I got was an American. My boss was American, and I got sent to Las Vegas, and I was just like, you sort of got to acknowledge that as like the irony of life and how you can't control anything. So then I became really curious by it, and I was thinking a lot about Las Vegas, especially because that was my teenage years. I'm feeling quite nostalgic for it. So I'm going to go to Vegas. I'm going to do, explore it, just see what it is. But yeah, it's sort of starting there and then just going through all the different, Brighton, London, Cardiff. The songs about Cardiff, and just, it's just sort of a mixture of like an overview. I feel like I'm sort of gliding over Peter Lanyon style over my life of 25 years.
Wow.
To just sort of acknowledge it. And actually it's raised a lot of stuff, because I think about the young girl I was, and I think it's understanding your own nature, and I'm thinking about just how mean people, particularly, like relationships, so horrible, and knowing that's not your fault, and that actually you don't need to be that person anymore. But actually, I think what I had done up until I made that record was just try and put it in a box.
Interesting. So
I was like, because I met my husband, and we left, and it was just like, oh my God, home, this is it. Like, that's all done with, in the bin. And actually, I literally hadn't thought about it. But I also hadn't thought about the girl I was, and a part of that girl was fun and ridiculous, and perhaps I've sort of tamed that, gone, you're not like that now, you're sort of grown up now, and you're like, and I think this record's been all about going, you have that in you, and if you don't acknowledge it, then it's only it's the Joan Didion quote, turn up unannounced at 4 a.m. of a bad night, asking why she's been deserted, which is exactly what's happened. So it's a process, but I think it's an important process with any sort of trauma, big or small. You need time to digest it. I mean, I've needed 10 years to digest that. But you also have to acknowledge it, and you have to face it. And I think better things come of it, and be empathetic to that person that you were. Because I think when I sort of rejected it, I was like, well, that was a failure. I don't want to do that anymore. So let's just get rid of that. And it was all tied up in that era, because there was such a flippancy to that whole decade, which is kind of being celebrated at the moment. And actually, there is something in frivolity, which I think is really important. But I don't think, I certainly wouldn't be celebrating the cruelty of it, because it was cruel. Yeah. It was really cruel. And unkind. And, it was very rare that I met anybody that I felt was looking after me or I could look after. Yeah. No one's looking after each other. But maybe that's just youth. Maybe nobody does. Maybe everyone's just a brat. I don't know.
No, I definitely think there's a thing about that time. I know from other people who I've spoken to about it who were in like similar industries, it seems like there was a particular, just like dog eat dog at that time.
So vicious. It was vicious.
Yeah.
Oh,
quite selfish.
No one and it's funny because, I went back to Wales, we made records, we put our first record out ourselves, and then Heavenly picked up on it. And it was, again, coming into a record label like Heavenly, who celebrate all of the great things about music. It's so, and they're really about like in the moment, in the gig, community of it, all of that. But there's a kindness and there's a
Yeah.
love and there's a really a caring of each other,
Yeah.
which I never came across. And, you know, because I sort of wasn't, I mean, I was always going to make records, but the experience that I had, I thought, sort of, I don't know, the music, I mean, I don't ever think of the music industry really, but I'd avoided it because I think that's the thing, like once the Pipettes came to an end, I didn't really go and try and find other people to collaborate. I was kind of like not interested in carrying on the feeling and hanging around the same people that were carrying it on. Like I was just like, this is not the vibe, and actually there's no creativity here either, and I can't keep carrying on this sort of facade of like whatever it was that that period was about. I was like, I reject all of this wholeheartedly. And that was so much to do with coming back to Wales and finding musicians and community in Wales as well. But there's a different, you know, Wales is different. People look after each other a bit more. They do. It's a smaller community. But again, you know, the links that I've made with Heavenly is reflected the same thing. So it's people are out there.
Yeah.
And I feel really lucky to have found a home there. Because it has all the elements of what the of joy and excitement of music, which is really important. Like I'm not sort of looking to make like boring stuff and calm, you know, conservative. It's not about that. Like music is about ridiculous, but it's like if you can just have that caring element too. And it's funny because I just don't think that's not the vibe of music anymore. Like didn't have the internet, just wasn't that. You know, it was like you went to gigs, like, you know, like the Pipettes had internet presence, but it was going to a gig. You're in the gig, you're in the vibe. You know, it was like the final moment of that before phones and all of that social media stuff.
So if we have that girl in mind on the bus back, looking at the trees, what would you say to her now with all of the experience you've had up until now? What would be the main things you would want if you could access her and reassure her and tell her something? What would you say? I
think, you know, because I've been asked that question before, and I always say the first thing I do, give her a hug.
Oh,
she's like, oh, it's okay. It's going to be okay. And I think, I also think there's a purity and intention, and I think with making stuff and music, because I think I went through a phase of going, gosh, my life has been so messy. Like, you know, I always admired people that just came out fresh out the box and they were like they were just fully formed, and there was a lot of that, I think, that happened again in the noughties and even later, that there was no sort of acknowledgement of the messiness of reaching the point where you're really in sync with what you're trying to do, and on all of those experiments that you have that actually are not mistakes, and they're okay. But I do remember I was thinking, God, this isn't authentic if I've tried stuff out and it sort of all doesn't fit in together in this really, you know, and especially because, you know, going into my 20s, I was meeting a lot of people that had done nothing apart from music. You know, they hadn't been dancing and all of this stuff and acting, whatever, you know, like really ridiculous stuff that I've tried out and not particularly succeeded at, but just done it and gone, oh yeah, okay then. And I remember thinking, God, I'm so inauthentic because I haven't just done music, I've done other things. But actually, everything's about life experience. And I think the older that you get, the more you can just pull that all into it. And actually, if you haven't got a life experience to share, I'm not sure what it is. Like, as much as I love the sort of sheer audacity and energy of youth, I think I'm less interested in it now because I kind of feel, particularly from music and art, and particularly from music, I want something a bit more insightful and more enriching in terms of like guidance in a way that perhaps popular music isn't always able to provide, but should, I think, because you don't become less intrigued or excited by music as you get older. You become more so, but I think your tastes improve, and I think that actually there's a bit more depth to what you're looking for emotionally in songs. So I'm kind of excited about that. And yeah, that would be what I would tell my younger self. I think it's okay, just be as messy as you want, because you can write it down in a book at some point.
Definitely. Have you ever
That no one's going to read, but just for yourself, maybe for your granddaughter.
have you ever thought of writing a book? Because you would have some damn good stories.
I did get asked to write a book, but I just think I was too young. And also, it's like what I feel like my first act is done now. And actually, that's a mourning. Like, I definitely think this record is a mourning.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like acknowledging that's over, which kind of has been quite hard to actually, when I've processed it, I've gone, that's over now. Okay.
Wow.
It's over. And it's therapeutic, obviously, as well. But I'm in the second act now.
What does the second act feel and
Well, what's
look
great
like?
about the second act, having survived the first, is that I think you have more ability to process things and not be as caught up in moments. And I think I'll make many mistakes, obviously. But I think it's about, the biggest thing my biggest achievement is finding security, I think, because I don't know how you survive without it. I think everybody needs to feel secure. And whoever that person or people are, you need them. And I think perhaps, again, that's in stark contrast with what I had in the noughties, because I didn't have any security at all, and I didn't have any in my teens either. So I spent 20 years without any security, any sense of home or family. And the past decade has been so much about investing in that, because it's something I never had. But you need it as an artist, I think. I think you do.
Yeah.
But to fully, because I always think, like, for you to come to the best conclusion in expression, it has to come from a place of security and safety. I think not having security is romanticised within pop culture, and it's certainly romanticised from sort of my generational culture of like, and actually it still does, like, all of these songs are about, you don't understand me, and you don't, it's always about these conflicts. And I actually think that there's room to try and move beyond those conflicts, because those conflicts come from not having security and not being in a good place, actually. And like, I don't know, I just think there's something in it.
So Act 2 will be coming from a place of security. Will that be the main difference between Act 1 and Act 2?
Huge. Because I think this last decade's been a rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And I think now that that's happened, I think that now is the time. And actually try and be interesting, if I can.
Well, try.
But do you know what I mean? It's about, like, because I think that there's freedom in security. And actually, culture teaches us, particularly through songs, that the freedom is in going on the road and being on your own and all of that stuff. And actually, I don't think that's freedom, because I think you're trapped in your pain.
Yeah. It's really interesting you say, like, I've been doing a few interviews with, like, weightlifters and people who do a lot of, like, gym, and they talk about there being a freedom in discipline as well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar in that way.
It really is. I totally agree with that. I mean, there's freedom in art. I mean, definitely comes from discipline. Doesn't come from anything else.
For sure. Yeah. The routine sometimes. There's a lot of freedom in a routine. Definitely.
Massive. Yeah.
That brings us on to Reese, your husband, Reese Edwards, who's also an artist in his own right and a musician. And you guys make a lot of music together, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's been such a journey, because it's been such a journey, because it was just that thing again of, like, I think when we met, we just knew it was going to be everything, and I always wanted everything. Like, I never thought, I think that's what was missing in a way, was that I just wanted a home, and I wanted a family, and I think, because I intensely think about music every second of every day.
Yeah.
I was always going to have to be with someone who thought exactly the same. Like, I could never be with someone that's like, oh, we're not going to talk about that, we're going to talk about something else, because I literally don't talk about anything else.
Love that.
Yeah, so it came from that, and we'd known each other for such a long time. Like, we'd known each other for a decade before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, Chase was just like the hot thing on the scene, when I was like 19 moving back to Wales. he was definitely a fresh out of the box, perfect,
Wow.
artist. That was just like, oh. So I was quite envious of him for a long time because he was just like, he had it all and he did all this production work and stuff and he made really good records that everyone was like, dang it.
Damn, Reese.
And then we just kept in touch then. And then he was sort of saying he was going to come and see a Welsh football match. It was Gary Speed's last football game actually in London, and he's like, yeah, we were both single, and then that was it. It was I just opened the door and went, hi, there we are.
Where have you been?
And that was it. It was just felt like I think both of us, we talk about it a lot, we just went, oh. I just remember lots of like finally being able to relax, which is just, I'd never done.
Interesting.
I hadn't even done it in my childhood because I didn't have a particularly relaxing childhood, It was quite really like edgy and not comforting at all. So it was the first time, like turning 30, that I went, finally my shoulders relaxed a bit.
Your jaw unclenched.
Yeah, it was that. And I think there's, as the feeling combined with complete excitement about where we're going to go, what are we going to do, of that, it was just what we're going to do. And then it was always an adventure. It was like, what we're going to do, because we sort of came together to do music.
Yeah.
But obviously that was dressed up.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
Excuse.
it was an excuse. Let's make some music together. But I just felt really lucky that we were able to do that, because it was, not everyone gets that chance. Yeah. It was really like, and culturally having the same references, but really very specific. It's like, Welsh kids TV shows from the 80s are just not like a subject many people know about. But it's that kind of stuff that is really important and nice, and again comforting, and really exciting as well. And just being each other's oak trees basically. It's been really interesting to develop records, fourth record now, and I feel like we're getting to a really interesting place, and everyone working out what they're good at, and because we love working together, and it is a lot, it's like 2 kids work records.
How do you manage that kind of like?
Oh no, we don't. We sort of, I think we were like, by the end of this process we were just like, oh my god, never again, we can't do that again. But there's always a conversation to be had, I think. And I find, it's complex, I think, finding space.
Yeah.
Within a relationship where everyone's a creative, where everyone's an artist.
It's true.
But those are the best relationships, I just don't think, I don't know, I can't, I mean, it makes sense to me that Teresa's an artist as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how...
Yeah. I wonder if there are any links between like your creative collaboration and then your parenting collaboration as well, because it is such a both are such like team roles. Like, are there any similarities in how you do those things?
Yeah, I think as long as you tell, I don't know, everything's an experiment, isn't it? And you don't really have authority over anything apart from being supportive. I've loved having children. It wasn't, really, again, it's like, until I met Teresa, I didn't even think about getting married.
Yeah, I remember you saying that to me.
I just said, I didn't even think about it. I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to be a bride.
Yeah.
Like, it sounded really stressful. And actually, our wedding day, we were both slightly embarrassed. We were like, oh my God, this is really
This is too much.
Yeah, it was just that, like, drawing in. As much as I love being on stage, the wedding was something else. I was just like,
it's a different kind of
spotlight. Both of us were like, oh my God, this is just so embarrassing. We didn't even have a first dance because we were like, we can't do that. Like, what do we think we are having a first dance?
On stage instead.
Yeah, exactly. I was never thought, but certainly in the noughties, I wasn't thinking I'd ever have children and get married. I'm like, it just was not on my radar. I thought, well, my mum didn't have a great time. She was always a bit like, oh God, such a, I was like, wow, that didn't sound like fun. Why would I do that?
No, fair.
Like, sounded terrible.
Yeah. How has it sort of changed you as an artist and a person, would you say, becoming a mum?
I don't know how much it does, to be honest. Apart from the physical element of, birthing 2 children, which kind of batters your body in a way, like, there are similarities to the way dancing has battered my body. Part of the reason I left dancing as well was like, I can't batter my body anymore. Like, I kind of want to keep using it. And I still get like pains in my feet and my legs from dancing because I didn't look after myself wasn't looked after. But from a parenting, all that parenting has done for me is made me more efficient with time.
Right.
Actually, because I do see, as a person, I think that you are. Yeah, maybe I'm not mature enough to be generous with my art and like make art for my children. But I think I'm constantly making art to try and remind me of myself.
Yeah.
Just to have that moment. It's always about going, yeah, you're still here. And actually, you still being here is the most positive thing that you can be for your children. Because I think you do need to live, you need to live that life, and they need to see parents going for it and doing in things that are interesting to them. It's really important.
Yeah. Even for self-esteem and
all of it.
confidence.
Oh, you've got to have it, because it's so full on. You know, I've had a very full on 2 years.
Yeah.
Being at home with a baby, which, you know, has many beautiful things about it, but it's also like, I think I've reacted with this record as well. I've really reminded myself of everyone that I've been, because those people, those me's were valid, and I want them with me. I don't want to leave them behind. I kind of want them to, I want to carry them with me and be fond of them and acknowledge them. And I think that will be more empowering moving forward. That just acknowledging your whole self, I think, is so important.
Definitely. So Act 2 is all about taking all of the characters from Act 1 and kind of nurturing them or looking after them.
Yeah, just looking after them and giving them the space that they need in a bit more of a secure way and less reactionary way, perhaps. Just with age and hindsight, I think you can be all the things you want to be, but it doesn't need to be destructive.
Yeah,
it really doesn't. There's no point. I don't think you need to be, and I feel really lucky to be in a position where I can feel like that.
It's taken a lot to get there.
Oh my god, it does. That's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it would be nice, yeah, just to, because you just do get to a point where you care less. You really know that the time is short. I mean, I kind of love it and I hate it at the same time. So I'm literally like every second. Wow. It's like, you're here is like such a gift. Wow. Like, use it in a way. I think up until this point I was like, yeah, I'll do it next week, I'll do it another time. And I think that coming to this point has made me realise that there isn't another time to do anything. Like, you've just got to like dive in. Interesting.
Was there a trigger for that sort of realisation or something?
I think it was just making the record and just going, oh my god, that flew 25 years. That's gone. That's gone now. It's not there anymore. Yeah. That's a different period, and kind of, I think that's definitely made. Gosh. It's made me realise that, and it's my age.
Wow. It sounds like this record is a big one for your own like self-development.
I think so.
Like a therapy for you.
Oh, honestly, Rosie's ridiculous. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's all it is. And I feel really lucky to be able to talk to you about it in this gorgeous environment. Because, you know, like I was saying to you, like, you know, Theresa and I was talking about like doing promo and discuss, and I was like, how am I going to do promotion for this album and not cry? Yeah, like I'm so like personal. Being analysed by Freud or something. Yeah. It's just like, I really appreciate having the chat with you, because it sort of lays it all out and it sort of gets you. And again, speaking in English, because I don't speak talk much in English, so it's really good to do this at this point. Wow. You know, before the record comes out next year.
Do you have an approximate date for the record?
It's going to be July.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, there's a bit of time for it, and I can't wait to share it, because you know, so many of the songs came from the piano as well, and I think going back to the piano, which is my first instrument, has been really nice, and just trying to write proper songs.
I can't wait to hear it.
No, it's good.
Can't wait.
It's a tearjerker, I think.
Oh God, is it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. Yeah.
And all your album covers are always so, just like, they're iconic. Like the Trezor one, I can literally, it's burned into my memory.
I know, Claire's fantastic. Claire Marie Blake, she's so fantastic, and we're going to do some more stuff together.
Yeah, you're working together.
Well,
again.
I love, you know, Claire's from Anglesey, and she is so unlike anything else in Wales. And I mean, Anglesey to me is the most similar to Cornwall, because it's an island, it's on its own, the culture's very different, even though everyone speaks Welsh, and it's not the same as the mainland and Gwynedd. and it's got a bit more edge. And I think the artists are far more, they're just pushing boundaries a lot more. And like Claire's, you know, she comes from a Catholic background as well, so I think imagery is so strong. And you know, Wales is non-conformist, so I think that's why we're not very, I don't think, great with cinematography generally, is because we've got rid of all of iconography, you know, in the Reformation, and particularly with nonconformism, which is all about the mind, and it's all about whitewashed, you know, walls, and you know, nothing frivolous. And I think probably because of the Irish dancing background and all of that, I sort of love that sort of element in Catholicism, which is all about, you know, it's all about the glitz, it's all about the imagery, it's all about symbolisms, and Claire's like that, so I'm excited to make another piece of work with her.
Oh, sure, yeah, because I know that you put a lot into the imagery of all of your music as well.
It matters, I think. It's really important because it's a world, isn't it? And you sort of want to express that world. And it took me a while to work out what character I was going to play in this record, because I was a bit like, oh, am I just that, like, in the 40s sort of looking back and being quite domestic? And I was like, no, I'm not. I want to be who that was. So we kind of flipped it a little bit, and I'm really glad, because I'm like, I want to live it rather than go, oh, that was that, and like move on.
God, I feel like I'm seeing you in such a time of like just before the precipice of this. It feels quite, I don't know, quite moved.
Oh, thank you. No, it's great. It's good to, gosh, it's really good to chat about it. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely. Really lovely, Rosie. Thank you so much for the welcome.
Thanks for being so honest with us. And
why not? I can't help myself. This is my problem. I sort of dig deeper and deeper, and I think, oh my God, what am I going to reveal next? I just can't help it. I can't help it. I'm sort of compelled. I'm compelled to share, and I think, I don't know what it comes from. I just don't like telling lies. I think I'm just literally like, here it is.
Yeah, it makes for the best interviews, though. It really does. Like the honest ones. Yeah.
You don't need a front, do you? Life's too short.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think about it too much. Like, I've been talking too much about that recently. I'm like, why am I keep talking about death? This is weird, but that's it.
So, final question would be, when do you feel most free?
Oh, nice. Oh, that's a great question. I think there's two senses of freedom that I get. So, like, when I write a song, the freedom of that, so it's both to do with music and expressing, like, what's beautiful about getting to write songs is the life that they have, that you don't necessarily know where it's come from. You're sort of just grabbing it out of the air, and it's just there, and then that becomes, there's a sort of, I tend to write quite intimately and quietly, generally so far. So there's a freedom in that, because you don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. So that's really exciting. And then the other freedom is being on stage.
I thought that might be it.
It is really. And it always has been, and it always will be. And I've really, I feel very comfortable with that now, because I did go through a phase of like, God, you need to grow up. Why do you need to keep going on stage? Like, who is this for? And I think that I've come out the other end going, like, really looking forward to my, like, hopefully Marlene Dietrich sort of, you know, battered, worn, sort of cigarette smoking lounge act that I'm quite excited about. I'm sort of aiming for, of just that, like, a bit of Liberace, all very Vegas, but just that kind of, because I always loved Jarvis Cocker, and what I loved about Jarvis Cocker mostly was the sense of life that he was projecting. He wasn't sort of some young squirts that was just like, you know, just energetic and really cool. He was like, you know, I've seen this and that. Even he just wasn't that old. He was like 30 or whatever, and I've always wanted to be that. I mean, there's a lot of women that want to be Jarvis Cocker. It's just, he just has that appeal. But
And we've dreamt of him coming to the residency, because he's a QPR fan as well. Very niche, but hardly any of us. But we have the same football team, so
oh,
my dad
amazing!
Loves him, so I'm hoping one day he'll come.
He did inspire a song from the new record. I went to watch him. There was a Rough Trade Books celebration, and Jarvis Cocker did a little bit of his Good Bob Bad Pop book behind some DJ decks. And then he came out at the end of it, and there was loads of dry ice, and it was all quite boomy, and he played a record, and he came out and just danced on his own on stage, and it inspired a song that I've got on the new album, because it just epitomised to me of that sort of the emptiness of what our in real life worlds are now.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's definitely been a big inspiration of the years, and sort of. So for so many women, though, it's an interesting thing. But that freedom of being on stage is definitely what it is.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I feel like there's so much more to come. I can't wait for the next. We'll have to do a follow-up and when everything's after Vegas, and
totally.
It's so interesting to hear how you go back now as who you are now, and maybe
I'm going to be emotional.
Yeah.
I'm going to be emotional. There's a new film out called The Last Showgirl with Pamela Anderson in it.
Love Pamela.
I love her. I always loved her as a teenager. I loved her. We're talking about it this morning. I loved her because she was empowered by her own sexuality. Because I was always like, because you would go through phrases and think, gosh, the bleach and everything, and it was just like, you just wanted to be Pammy when you were little. I was like, as a teenager, I was just like, I loved her, but she was so empowered by her own sexuality, and it's clear, obviously, her coming out the other end. It's clear. I feel really vindicated for why I loved her. But yeah, there's this film, The Last Showgirl, that's going to be out when we're in Vegas, and I just feel like there's so many things like sort of coinciding with it, and just going back as my own person as well to a place that had such a big impact.
Are you taking the kids or?
No.
I was going to say,
God.
it'd be tricky.
There's no room for children in Las Vegas. It's just not the place.
Thank you so much, Gwenno. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Rosie. Thank you.